All right. We are starting our meeting tonight with an exciting announcement. One of the more important staff positions in Princeton is our arborist. Not every community is fortunate to have an arborist, but Princeton is a tree city, and I think we found in the past that doing good planning and having a good person in that position is a way for the town to actually save money in the long run and just be a better steward of one of the things that makes Princeton a special place. So I'm happy to announce that we've hired a new arborist, Taylor Saputo, and I'm going to invite up Bob Huff to do the introduction. Oh, and Taylor too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I don't need this. I am very pleased tonight to be here to introduce to you our new arborist. Taylor is going to join us starting next Monday, the 30th. But we thought since we had a meeting tonight, we would come tonight, introduce him to you. We kind of pooled candidates, so we went through a number of interviews, and we're very excited. Taylor's been with Hill International, been doing a lot of work in New York City over the last couple of years. He's from Allentown, New Jersey, sits on their Shade Tree Commission. Like I said, we're very excited that he's joining us starting next week.
Thank you. As Bob said, my name is Taylor Saputo. I grew up in Mercer County my whole life. I attended Mercer County Community College for horticulture. Then I transferred to Rutgers for environmental planning and horticulture. I grew up in the landscape construction industry, and I've been an arborist for the last 10 years. The last 4 years I've spent working for Hill International, a worldwide project management firm, specifically working with the account with the New York City Parks Department. I've worked on all the green infrastructure programs specifically sponsored by de Blasio, the Million Street Tree campaign, planting trees throughout all the open space, and also the Trees and Sidewalks campaign, constructing new sidewalks around city trees in order to preserve them for the long term. And I'm very excited to be here, and I thank you.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
And then I have a sad announcement tonight, and that is that our longtime town planner, I don't even know how many years, he's not retiring yet. In fact, we're squeezing every minute we have out of him for these last few days. But I just wanted to ask everybody in joining me in giving a standing ovation to Lee for all of his work for the town.
You know, I also want to add that, I mean, I hope we have another opportunity to do this, but I might have known Lee the longest because I met him as an objector many years ago. Do you remember that, Lee? At the hospital site. And I became a council person eventually, but he was one of the reasons. He was always very understanding to, and he is understanding to objectors, and that's a really hard job. I know that, and I knew that. I mean, I tried to be always really nice when I was an objector, but I got angry and upset, and so did a lot of people. So I just want to also thank you for how you treated me when I was an objector.
Thank
you. All right, so I'm going to start on my right with Mr. Cohen for any announcements for tonight.
None tonight.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Lieberman?
No, I don't know if Mr. Cohen may have mentioned, is that just for the council, the Grand Pals luncheon on Wednesday? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
it's
All right.
general for the public.
Okay, all right, thank you. No announcements.
Mr. Miller?
I actually have two cycling-related announcements. May 6th is the return of Ciclavia, which is an annual event where we close Quaker Road, and everyone is welcomed to use human-powered vehicles or just walk on Quaker Road, and we'll be repeating last year's wildly successful Chasing George ride that leads from the Battle Monument in Trenton and follows the towpath from Trenton to Princeton. I'd also like to say that we're moving forward with our plan for what's now been branded the Beta Bike Lane, which is going to be on Wiggins from Witherspoon Street to Walnut Lane, and the dates will be May 19th through the 29th. A team of volunteers is going to transform that stretch of road to include 2 bike lanes on either side of the road, and there will be a lot of taping and not of the recording variety. So once again, Ciclavia May 6th and the Beta Bike Lane May 19th through the 29th.
Ms. Farah?
Yes, I do have one for actually 2. Youth Advisory Committee. They are now applications are now being accepted for the 2018-2019 year, and they're available online. This is open to 9th graders. And the deadline for applying is April 29th. The other announcements on behalf of the Rec Department, there are still some seasonal positions that are available, and applications are being accepted online. To date, though, they already have hired 140 seasonal employees for the summer.
Great, thank you. I just had a few additional announcements. The first is this Friday, April 27th. I'll be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor session at the Princeton Public Library between 8:30 and 10 a.m. Later that day, also Friday, April 27th, we're going to be planting a Princeton elm tree in honor of Arbor Day, but more specifically in honor of former Mayor and former Councilman Bernie Miller. And that's going to be at 11 a.m. Out in front of Monument Hall, and everybody is welcome to that, especially my colleagues here. And then Sunday will be Communiversity. I highly recommend that if you're going to Communiversity, you don't drive, but you ride your bike, or you walk, or you take the free transit bus. There's going to be, I think for the first time, free bike valet parking. They're using the High Tops space on Wiggins, so if you're riding your bike, you can have it parked there. And if you want to take the free shuttle, there's information about the timing and pickups on the Arts Council website. Are there any staff announcements? Nope. Okay. There is a note here for an award of recognition tonight. We're actually going to be postponing that for a future meeting because the awardee had a last-minute scheduling problem. And now we come to public comment, and we'll start with the sign-up sheet with Dr. Surinder Sharma.
Thank you, Ms. Pierre, and the members of the council. I have 2 items that I like to bring it up. One is what I call the action items, and that what I mean is that many residents and many taxpayers come to this podium and they bring a lot of good suggestions a lot of times, and I noticed that it'll be a good suggestion from perspective of us to somebody take notes of those, those suggestions or actions they want you to look into. And you, as you said, you don't respond to them in real time, which is good because there's no need for it. However, may I suggest that somebody takes notes of those suggestions, and then hopefully in future meetings, somebody could respond to them. Yes, we looked into it. Yes, your suggestions are good, and we'll take action on it. Or you could say, well, we considered it, but unfortunately we can't do it for such and such reasons. So may I please take note of that? And I have done it in my committees in the past, and I think it's a great thing. Sometimes you tend to forget what somebody said it, and then if you kind of take notes of those, and I think it'll be a good thing to do. So please take that into consideration. And the second part of my question is, which is what we brought it up last week too, and understand the affordable housing is a issue that you're all working very hard, and maybe at least know what your major milestones are, like when you will decide on certain things, so that we know what is to be expected instead of just coming every time and then knowing whether to be discussed or not discussed at that particular day. If you could at least give us the major milestones so we can all be prepared and work with the council and give our suggestion to you, so that'll be really appreciated. So thank you again, and I appreciate that, and keep up the good work. So
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So I think those are both good suggestions. We try to always do follow-up when we have suggestions. So typically you'll hear us, if there's a concrete suggestion, we'll refer it at the meeting to one of our boards and commissions, or to a group, or to a staff member. So actually there's an item later on in tonight's agenda, you'll see it on the consent agenda, which came as a result of some public comment of somebody who wanted to bring back the senior nutrition program to Princeton. And so when the issue was brought up, I think council acknowledged it was an issue. We referred it to Mr. Grosser to continue to work on with Sue Hoskins at the Senior Resource Center. And, you know, it took a while, but we are bringing it back tonight, and we're going to be voting on it, hopefully, to approve it. When there's other issues, we'll have other advocates come up, or often we'll refer things to the Environmental Commission, or to the Bike Committee, or to CFAC. But we try to do that. Oftentimes we can't discuss it at the council meeting, but that's what we use our boards and commissions for. So it's an excellent suggestion. And then we talked some rough dates, and I don't know if, Mark, you feel comfortable just going over maybe generally where things are going to happen.
I'll give some general dates and some targets.
This for affordable housing.
And the ones that we have in terms of the affordable housing timeline put together. This evening we reviewed and finalized what are the housing options that we will be recommending. The beginning of May, we'll be having a closed session with the planning board members to review those draft housing options with the planning board. We would be then, between May and June, be preparing our housing element of fair share plan, ordinance for the ordinance resolutions and spending plan, and affordable marketing plan. We will then have to submit to the court by June 22nd a notice and file our housing report with the court. We would then, in July, around July 23rd, will be our compliance hearing with the court. In between this time, or roughly in June, we'll be having some public meetings in terms of reviewing the final plans with the public.
I will also add to that a couple members of council have been working on an FAQ regarding affordable housing, and we're hoping to finalize that and get it out. It will answer questions more generally, but we're hoping to put a link up there. When we redid the website, some of the affordable housing stuff didn't quite make it all the way over. So the original plan that we put together, which will form the basis of the new plan we're putting together. We're obviously having to add to that, but what we already have submitted to the court, that's a public document, and the public can definitely review that. Any other comments on that? Okay, are there any other comments from the public tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to reports. And the first report tonight is from Lieutenant Morgan for the police report.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few items I'd like to bring to your attention this evening. Some information that's not in the report that you received. First, this past week, the department participated in the Street Smart campaign. Maybe it's something you're aware of, or you saw some of the advertisements downtown, or some of our officers out there as well. But just to give you some information on the program and what we did this year. It's promoted by the New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, and it's a public education campaign to increase awareness for pedestrian safety, especially in high traffic, high volume type areas such as Nassau Street, Washington Road. And their goal, as they put it, is to change the pedestrian and motorist behavior to help reduce the amount of accidents resulting in injuries and fatalities. So what that means for us, we participate in the program twice a year. It's a week-long campaign. It was supposed to start last week, Monday through Friday, but we got rained out on Monday, so it ended today. So some of the numbers I have aren't finalized. They're some average numbers, but I just want to give you some insight into it. And there's really two components to it. There's an education and a enforcement campaign. With the education part of it, we provide handouts. We have conversations on the streets with pedestrians. We use social media as well, and we've also partnered with Princeton University this year again. If you go down Washington Road, you'll see there's a lot of pedestrians traffic in that area. A lot of it's college students, so we brought them in, and they were out there with us again today. And then there's the enforcement end of it as well, with summonses to increase the compliance. On average, we do 4 hours a day with 3 to 4 officers, and on average, we have over 1,000 contacts a day, which I think is quite incredible. Yeah, the literature that we hand out, we do it in English and in Spanish. Even over the weekend, we had officers down at the Truck Fest on Prospect. They were down there handing out literature as well. And then on Sunday after Mass at St. Paul's, as parishioners came out, they handed out information there. So we try to maximize our exposure and the contacts with the community to help with the campaign and create awareness. And this is just, it's 2 weeks out of the year, but it's also something that we do daily as part of our normal patrol. The messages that are conveyed through this program, for the motorists, it's to obey the speed limit and stop for pedestrians. For the pedestrians themselves, it's to wait for the walk sign and to use the crosswalk. And one that we're seeing quite often is get your head out of your cell phone, get your head up and look where you are. So if you noticed in our year-end report, our pedestrian accidents did go up last year, and unfortunately, we did have a fatality. So this is something that the police department has taken on with some emphasis. Not just these 2 weeks throughout the year, but daily in high volume areas to increase the awareness. Secondly, Thursday is Bring Your Child to Work Day. It's a program that the Safe Neighborhoods Bureau does every year. It's for all the employees in town. Similar to the past, it'll be a tour of the police department, a canine demonstration. The fire department will be involved, EMS will be involved as well. So if there's any employees that are interested, contact Sergeant Williams of the Safe Neighborhoods Bureau. Lastly, the bike rodeo, save the date, is May 19th. It'll be at the CP pool. We'll have our bike safety course set up again. We'll be giving bike safety tips. And a thank you to Princeton Pie. They'll be providing the pizza again this year. And McCaffrey's for the hot dogs and drinks. And our officers will be there cooking the hot dogs. And that'll be from 10 to 1 o'clock. And lastly, I second the mayor's opinion on please bike to Communiversity and help with traffic.
Actually, I do have an announcement related to that, which is that there will be bike parking provided at High Tops. What do we call valet bike parking by the PBAC. So if you were worried that you wouldn't be able to find a place to park your bike when you ride into Communiversity, that's where to park.
Okay, Mayor, Lieutenant, thank you. I want to, it just happened today. I was crossing Washington Road, and there were all these officers handing out materials.
Yeah.
So I went up thinking it would be my buddies in the Princeton Police Department, but it was actually public safety.
Yes.
So it was so great, and then you guys were a little further up, so it was great to see, especially on such a beautiful day,
Yes.
folks out. And I know, because I'm doing it every day, we have real issue. I mean, there are students walking, reading their phones as they're crossing the road and stuff, and there are real danger issues there.
Yeah.
So I was so glad to see you guys out there. So you feel like it's been a success so far?
Absolutely. Again, with the amount of contacts that I've been told that we have every day, over 1,000 contacts
Yeah.
every day, that's absolutely tremendous. So hopefully we're getting the information out there. Hopefully there's some awareness and some compliance going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I heard people, it was all the interactions I observed were really pleasant, which is nice.
And our partnership with the university has been ongoing. It hasn't been just this last time, so it's been over the last couple of years.
It was nice. So just a quick question. I feel like this is the first time I've seen in forever that you have every officer available. Am I right in seeing that? Or maybe I
Yes.
just missed that?
Yes.
That no illnesses or injuries?
No illnesses.
How does
no
that feel?
injuries. It feels great.
To have everybody on the
Yes,
case? Is
yes,
that making
yes.
life a little, maybe
We do
more-
have some retirements coming up very shortly, so those numbers will change.
So a good reminder to us that we are going to need to, Public Safety Committee has been talking about a plan to initiate recruitment
Yes.
with those retirements, in light of those retirements. But the good news is that the force is at full
Healthy.
strength. You've got everybody, which,
Yes.
And-
Thank you for noticing. Thank you.
so, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, we're living in, unfortunately, just what happened in Toronto today with the van and what happened at the Waffle House in Tennessee
Right.
the other day. And it seems like you can't wake up or watch television without seeing this cruel insanity. And I was wondering if there is something, I know that the police, there are things that we do to protect our citizens and residents in Princeton, but I was wondering if there's something that could either be on the web or something that to let people know if they see or suspect anything, no matter how little it may be, to anonymously notify the police department.
So there is the See Something, Say Something campaign, and with Communiversity coming up, we've been in contact with Homeland Security, and they will be out on Nassau Street this week, part of that campaign, putting up some information to if you do see something suspicious, to contact the police department. And then again, that goes back to our partnership with the community. The community needs to have the trust in the police department that if there is something out there that doesn't look right to them, that does look suspicious, to call the police department. We certainly encourage that.
Yeah, I have a question that's a completely different subject, and that's, I'm really proud of our police department for publishing the statistics on race for motor vehicle stops. But there's been talk, I think, in the community, but also in the country at large about juveniles and criminal justice issues concerning juveniles. And I think at one point we talked about asking the police to keep statistics on juveniles as well, on how many juveniles are being, given station house adjustments and at the school, how many are called, and the race of those kids that are getting in trouble from official channels that you deal with. And I don't know if you do keep track of that. And I mean, of course we don't want to compromise anyone's privacy, but is there a way to do that?
We do have that information.
You do?
That's something that we can discuss administratively and at public safety. Again, you're dealing with juveniles, so you need to be careful of what information you do release. But we do have that information.
I mean, maybe we could have a year-end, report.
Okay.
Because I think the schools are talking about changing changing attitudes about punishment. So.
Okay.
You can
Absolutely.
certainly,
Yeah,
Jenny,
we'll,
we can take that up at Public Safety Committee.
absolutely.
I had a question related to the crosswalks, and Deanna's right next to you. What's the standard for creating a crosswalk? So there are some streets, as I'm thinking now, Princeton Avenue and Nassau, that don't have a crosswalk, and I wonder, are there standards, one, and do more crosswalks encourage people to cross in the crosswalk as opposed to just bolting the shortest distance to their car?
The standard part.
So any intersection, whether the crosswalk is marked or not, there is a crosswalk that exists there. It is a location for pedestrians to cross. One of the examples you gave was a state highway, so that's a special case, Princeton Avenue and Nassau Street. We try to take a look at it with the Traffic Safety Committee when we're doing road projects, when we're doing our restriping, and when there's requests to see if it makes sense to put in the striped crosswalks at these intersections. Sometimes because of the built condition, we choose one corner versus another corner. Like, for example, on Spruce Street right now, that's one of our improvement projects, and at Pine, there's no crosswalk, but there's sidewalk on both sides. So we're looking at it, well, we should have a marked crosswalk on that street at that location, and because of the built condition, it makes more sense on one corner than another. We could go through and mark every crosswalk, but it can become a safety issue because we do hear that depending on how close the roads are together, the intersecting roads are, it becomes almost a hazard for drivers to keep a view of pedestrians as well as the vehicles. I'm thinking it's come up with Maple and Nassau Street in that area. So it's something the professionals work together with to find the right balance of mobility for pedestrians and vehicles, but also that safety factor.
Thanks, Deanna.
And we have a request into the New Jersey, to DOT for the, it's not for a crosswalk that Heather, that you requested. Is that Princeton Avenue, or is
Yeah,
that?
that's where I thought, I promise I didn't put Tim up to it. That one, there is a request into the state, right? I know it's not your responsibility, but you have put that into the state. Tim, that's what you're thinking, right? Because there's just nothing between Murray and all the way to Harrison. And so you see a lot of people running across there, yeah. So is there any update on that? Could that take years?
No, unfortunately, there's no update, but perhaps the mayor and I can get one this week when we have a meeting with the commissioner at DOT.
So
Ms. Frank.
I do have a question. It just, something came to mind when you were reporting on the pedestrian public safety campaign. Do those officers wear different uniforms, or are they the standard blue, or
No,
is
it would
something?
be the uniform of the day, the traditional blue police uniform that we
Okay.
wear.
And the only reason I ask is because that coincides, it just reminded me a few days back that there was some rumors going around, and that some members of the community thought there was ICE activity in the community. And I think it was when you were doing that campaign, and I think that was just a confusion, because I checked and I didn't see anything reported, but it just, when you were reporting on that, it reminded me it was probably that. And
Possibly, but it was our regular uniform, long sleeves, shirt and
Okay.
tie.
Well, could have been public safety also, because their uniforms are
Th-
slightly
their
different, right?
color is different, darker blue.
so what I was told was that there were officers wearing black.
That could be public safety.
Okay. And so some people in the community were concerned, thinking that it was ICE activity.
Did public safety take part in this also?
Yes.
Okay, sorry if I missed it.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
No,
so
they-
I don't
they're
know
right
if
there.
there's anything that we can do ahead of time to make sure, to clarify what it is that's going on, so it doesn't create any,
Angst.
yes.
So I had one question reviewing the charts in the report. It seemed like there was a big uptick in overtime the beginning of this year versus the beginning of last year, and especially in February. Do you have a sense? And it
For
was
Patrol overtime?
all three categories that the overtime was reported for.
Well,
It was
dispatch would be
and-
because of the training of IXP.
But the detectives was the biggest increase, but patrol officers was also an increase.
Patrol, and it would be DB as well, but patrol storms, and the incident on Nassau Street at Panera generated a significant amount of overtime. And then I would also be with
This is
DB
from
as
the
well.
month, this is the month
Sorry?
of February, so that wouldn't have been the Panera, yeah.
Well, the detective overtime is call-driven. So if there are incidents where we need to bring a detective in after hours, that would generate the overtime. But all of the Detective Bureau overtime is call-driven. I can't tell you offhand what those calls would be, but that's how that overtime is generated. And I know during the winter with patrol with storms, especially with the trees coming down with the wind and the snow, we bring in additional officers. So I imagine that would be the increase of the overtime there.
Are there any additional questions for Lieutenant Morgan? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and now I'm not going to forget council reports. So we'll start again with Mr. Cohen.
I have no reports.
Okay. No? Wow, all right, Mr. Quinn?
Just one report and a missed announcement. Councilwoman Fraga, Councilman Liverman, and I continue to work on our one-year review of the Civil Rights Commission. Unfortunately, it's not looking like we're going to meet our May 1st deadline, but I wanted to ask for an additional, say, 2 weeks, and to assure you that the work is continuing. Getting the three of us together and our interview subjects has been a little more challenging than any of us imagined. And my announcement that was missed was that PEC meets on Wednesday night, and this is the rescheduled meeting with the university's green team. So Ron McCoy is going to be talking about the university's sustainability efforts, not just as they relate to the campus plan, but stuff that's going on campus, so that it's part of our learning from them, and it should be an interesting meeting. We've cleared the agenda so that it's pretty much that. So that's Wednesday in the community room, 7:30.
Great, thanks. Ms. Fraga?
Yes, I actually don't want to steal anyone's thunder, so I don't know if it's been reported or it's going to be reported regarding the Maas playground. As you all know, most of you participated. We officially broke ground on construction on this past Wednesday, the 18th. The original date that was listed for completion under the contract was June 15th, but due to the late storms that we had in March, the contractor started 2 weeks later than planned, so the actual completion date is probably going to change, but depending on how much progress is made. So we'll get a better sense once that work gets going.
Thank you. I had a few reports. The first is, I think most of council came to the neighborhood character meeting that was last week. But that effort is continuing to make progress. There, I think we heard a lot of positive feedback with Jim Constantine's presentation and the direction it's going. So we're hoping to have some of those ordinances in front of council soon, hopefully as early as next month. I mentioned this before, but I just wanted to highlight the an item on the consent agenda for this evening to bring back the senior food nutrition program to Princeton. There's been a 5-year hiatus where it's been hosted for Princeton residents in Lawrence. And it's really great and exciting that we're able now to bring it back to Princeton, thanks to the efforts of Mr. Grosser and Sue Hoskins at the Senior Resource Center. And I especially want to thank Mercer County for working with us, and also credit Mrs. Wu, who came and made an eloquent case and really lit the fire to get this going. So I want to thank everybody for that. On this past Saturday, it was a beautiful day, and there was a nice collaboration event over at Mountain Lakes Park. There's a group that came out of one of the the Princeton, Code for Princeton groups at the hackathon. So they developed an app to help identify ash trees and evaluate them. And there were a bunch of people from the Shade Tree Commission and then just other interested residents, and they were running all over Mountain Lakes, inputting, geocoding the ash trees there. And it was a little challenging because they haven't fully budded out, but now they're all experts on how to identify an ash tree by its bark and other things. The weekend before was opening day for Princeton Little League. My pitch was okay. Not my best, but it went in a straight line. It's always a little stressful for me. I'm not like a baseball person. But the fields look great, and it was, if you remember, we had winter, just continuous brutal winter, and then one day it was spring, and it was, I just want to give kudos to the rec department and everybody else who helped make the fields look really beautiful. And it's just a really great organization. I know we're going to be honoring John Durbin in a future meeting. And then we also had an all-day meeting with the Bloomberg Working Group. And one of the great things about being in this Bloomberg Challenge is the Bloomberg Foundation pays for 2 coaches to help Princeton through our application. So we have one coach who's an expert in design thinking, who is helping us develop different prototypes on how to test them. And then we have a second coach who specializes in how to measure impact, especially in the governmental realm. And so it's been just an incredible professional development experience for all of us who've been involved in it. And they seem really excited about our application and the progress that we've made so far. We've had a great public response. We went to lunch that day at Jam and Crepes because we wanted to show off our one of our best composting restaurants in town. And they had a lot of good advice for us too. So hope to have more positive reports on that as we go along. Are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. A few updates regarding bike parking in town. We are looking to launch new covered bike parking in the Spring Street Garage in the beginning of May, as well as a bike corral on Witherspoon Street across from the public library at the same time. We'll be bringing along with that some upgraded signage for directional signage indicating where parking is available and to walk bikes. We are also working on a pilot installation of speed cushions on John Street. If you recall, this was something that came out through our stakeholder meetings with the Mary Maas Playground, was concerns about speeding and speeds, especially around the playground. So we have ordered rubber speed cushions, which measure about 6 feet wide by 12 feet long, and we will be putting 2 installations of them near Mary Maas Park. One will be south of the Lytle Street intersection, and the other one will be located at the northern end of the park. You'll see it now. There's white paint on the roadway indicating where those will be. We've been coordinating with emergency services to do a test run of their vehicles through the area to make sure that they act as we hope that they will, which means the emergency vehicles will be able to drive on either side of the cushion because of their axle width, but regular vehicles will have to go over the cushion. So again, another installation for Public Works. We're looking to get that in place as soon as we can, as soon as we have signage available. And for many of you that came out today, thank you. We had the parking consultant in town with the new meter vendor IPS group demonstrating the multi-space and single-space meters. They will be coming back to the next meeting on May 7th with council with an updated schedule for the implementation of the new parking system, as well as a few resolutions that will support the purchase of the meters and the mobile app. so that, and plus we'll add in a small work session at the meeting as well, but it's been going very well, and we're excited for the feedback that we've gotten so far from community folks.
Great. Any other staff reports? Nope, okay. Then we will move on to our ordinance introductions for this evening. The first is 2018-11, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton merging Article 4, Division 14, and Articles 8, 9, 10, 10A, and 10B of the Princeton Borough and Princeton Township Land Use Ordinances, and amending Section 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this ordinance represents some of the consolidation work that we've been doing for our land use ordinances. I don't know if Lee, you want to make any remarks about it, or?
Thank you. I think mostly I'll take...
Lee, I don't mean to cut you off. I just realized there's a typo in the title of the ordinance.
Okay.
Instead of Section 10B, it should say Chapter 10B.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Can we just
we're just
fix
introducing,
that
so you're
for-
fine.
okay.
Thank you. Good evening. As you indicated, we're trying to harmonize as much as we can the ordinance. Articles 1 through 7 have been harmonized already a couple of years ago. So what we're doing tonight is taking most of the administrative functions, site plans, subdivisions, and that kind of thing, and combining the borough and the township. We also started by taking all the definitions that were throughout the ordinance, and we're bringing them all into the definitions section of the ordinance. So what I'd like to do is I'll talk about chunks of the ordinance, and then if there are questions from you, to take them. So we have definitions. We're amending section 10B-2, and that's roughly at our page numbers may be a little bit different, but that should be around pages 2 to 10. I don't know if any of the council members had questions on any of the definitions. We didn't create many new definitions. It's literally just moving them from other sections. If not, the next big change is at Article 4, Division 14, Fire Protection. That's my pages 10 to 14 if you're following along. And what we did is the borough and the township had similar requirements, but they were tied to zone, R1, R2, and the like, or in a commercial zone. And what we're doing is we're switching so that it reflects the density of the residential development. So in R1 in the former borough was a half-acre zone, and you'll see there's a standard now for fire protection, mostly about fire flow, for that. Similarly, commercial, we kept to the zoning. So we just were combining the two using density for residential as the primary change. I don't know if there were questions there.
I just have a comment. For those who don't know, I'm actually have been meeting with a small group, a citizen group, who are interested in improving fire safety during construction. And I think that while it's not important to work it in at this point in time because it's a change, that there will probably be some change to this section of the ordinance once we get further along, because this is the section of the ordinance that requires applicants to submit a fire plan, and to suggest that such a fire plan should include plans for fire safety during construction as well as post-construction makes sense to me. So it's just a heads up.
Okay, the next major change, I'm going to jump to Article 8, Subdivisions and Site Plans. This is found, I think, on around page 26. It's sections 10B 127 through 136.2, and at 10B 127, we've amended the ordinance to require electronic submission via seamless docs or other electronic means, or as directed by the municipality prior to an application being scheduled. This way we'll get all those subdivisions, site plans, and the supporting documents in an electronic form. We could hopefully then post them on the web, as well as transmit them to the various committees and commissions that review the applications. I don't know if there are questions there.
I also had a comment. for Lee before the meeting. This was something that I was pushing for, as a part of, well, really 3 of our 4 major goals, affordability, user-friendly government, and sustainability, in order to be able to switch, to allow applicants to submit electronically instead of via paper. I feel like the way this ordinance reads right now, this is just an additional requirement. The ordinance still requires applicants to submit all of their documentation in paper form as well as the electronic submission. So I think it's not to the point where it's meeting the goals that I had. I think I'd like to propose, maybe you can, I know Lee's not going to be around to work on it with me, but maybe with Trishka and Mark before the next meeting to see if we can get it to reflect a little bit more the goals the council has established for the year.
I'm not sure if that would still work with the public hearing date as it is, but maybe we can, I would recommend maybe we can discuss this as part of the goals discussion later on in terms of, is this something we want? I mean, I don't have a great sense of how complicated that change would be. It seems to make a lot of sense to most of us, but if staff feels like it's more complicated, maybe it needs to be more of a goal or priority if we decide we want to do it this year, and then when that would fall.
Right. I think my goal would be to have the language in the ordinance permit a transition to electronic submission without necessarily mandating it immediately. But it's something, I think Trishka and I could go back and forth a little, and she can tell me if I'm crazy or not.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'd have to look at in conjunction with Jerry Muller. Probably Eileen would need to weigh in. If we were to make the change prior to adopting the ordinance, I think that could trigger the need for a reintroduction. So my recommendation would be to look at it once the consolidated ordinance has been adopted so that it doesn't hold up the public hearing schedule. But definitely, I don't have a sense of how complicated or not complicated it would be, and maybe Lee can weigh in. But I just think in terms of, in order to avoid a reintroduction, I would wait till the ordinance was adopted, then do the amendments.
Dave, I'm sorry for not remembering the details about this section, but right now, does it say, because I'm looking, I forget, that they're required to do both, or that they are allowed to do electronic?
It says they're required to do both.
Okay.
Right now, that's the way it reads.
Okay, because for me, it's a transparency issue, that if they, so that we can more easily share planning documents, that's the most important issue rather than the paper issue. Just so I'm glad that they're required to, because I think that does increase transparency. Since right now, I hope we can soon get these documents up on the website. Right now, like my neighbor happened to have an application, and I had to come here to look at and go up the steps to look at the planning document. So it's kind of a pain for other people who aren't here all the time.
Okay, go on to Article 9, which is the subdivision section. Just some minor edits. We've added, each application that comes in must comply with a checklist. They have to provide certain information. And we've modified the subdivisions for minor subdivision, preliminary subdivision, and final subdivision to include some additional items that were requested through the Historic Preservation Commission and as well as for affordable housing. We've also developed at section 10B 160 through 10B 188, we've updated our standards for streets, sidewalks, bicycle paths, and off-track improvements. We've specifically included at section, in that section, some requirements for both sidewalks and bicycles. If there are no questions on those, moving along, section 10B 198 to 202 was a special office research subdivision standards. We're recommending you delete those. Nobody remembers ever having an application for that. So we're going to recommend the deletion of that. And then a new section at section 10B203 regarding surface parking design standards. We didn't have standards for the type of surface, aisle widths, and the like. We've also included in subsection C at my page 70 some guidance on when you should be using porous pavement, which is relatively new in the community. That takes us up to Article 10, unless there are questions on Article 9. Article 10 is our site plan section. We've moved some stuff around. We had specific requirements in terms of setbacks and defining waterway corridors at old 10B203 and 204. All the definitions were moved to section 10B2, and we'll talk about the waterway corridor. We've moved to section 10B240 towards the end. That's where there's information and requirements on floodplain and flood hazards, and we thought that was related and would be a better spot for that as well. Again, section 10B203 now has the parking design standards. That's we're up to page 70. Section 10B206 is a combination. The former borough had a provision in the ordinance that exempted properties in the E2 zone that were more than 150 feet from a public street from coming before the planning board for a site plan review. After a lot of discussion on terms of the planning board, the E2, I should point out, would cover some of Princeton University, some of the seminary, and some of Westminster Choir College as well. There was some concern at the planning board level as to whether we really wanted to provide a exemption for those buildings, and what we've done is put in a new standard that does keep the exemption, but first it limits it to properties that are at least 30 acres inside. So we were saying, let's have a large lot so that the issues may be a little bit smaller. However, we then limit it to just buildings that are 5,000 square feet or less, or that create a parking area of 10 or fewer spaces. So they're fairly minor in terms of the impact on the community or in the neighborhood, and that the university would be exempt, but anything over that 5,000 square foot of building or more than 10 parking spaces would have to come before the planning board and have a public hearing. Any questions on that change? Also in the site plan section, we updated the site plan checklist for a minor site plan, a preliminary site plan, and a final site plan. Same thing as in the subdivisions. We've added some more requirements for historic and affordable housing. At section 10B227AD, we've updated our tree preservation, mitigation, and tree replacement section of the ordinance. Basically, the new standards, and they're found, I think, at page 114 with a new chart, at least on mine, at page 116, to match the recently Shade Tree Commission's ordinance in terms of tree replacement. And you can see it's now more than a one-for-one tree replacement. It's based on inches and the like. So we now match what is the current ordinance. At 10B240.1 is where the relocated stream buffer corridor is. And then Article XA, which was preservation plan, is being deleted. It should have been deleted. We combined the Historic Preservation Commission's duties, responsibilities, and roles earlier, a couple years ago, and that provision goes forth in that. And then we made some minor edits to Article XB, which is general development plans. We don't get many of those. Those are usually for large lots that will probably have a development or approval process that extends out for 10 years or more, and we've only had one of those in the last 30 years that I'm aware of. That's a summary of the changes. This brings us up to harmonizing everything but the zoning ordinance and the affordable housing ordinance, which is underway as we speak. I know the Affordable Housing Board has a draft of that. I don't know if there are any questions for me.
Just a question for Trishka. Where did we leave it with the paper piece? So we're keeping the language as is, as introduced, and revisiting later? I'm just
My
double checking.
Yeah, my recommendation would be leave it as is. I mean, you can start revisiting now, but I wouldn't actually make any changes to the ordinance until after it's been adopted. So you could introduce amendments once this is adopted.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, this is just part one of that, so we will be revisiting the zoning again, and maybe at that point, it might be a good time to then make those amendments.
Thank you.
Okay, good job. Thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion from council? I'd like to open it up to see if there's anybody here who'd like to speak on this ordinance at this point. And if not, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krumiller,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Liverman.
Yes.
Ms. Krumiller,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga.
Yes.
The ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 21st, 2018. Next, we come to 2018-12, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton concerning streets and sidewalks, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968.
Thank you all very much.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
But we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. See you tomorrow morning. All right. Ms. Stockton, do you want to walk us through this one or give us the
I
highlights?
don't think I can do it quite as well as Mr. Solo did for his, but I will.
Maybe just the highlights.
The highlights. Okay, so this is a harmonization of the Borough and Township Streets and Sidewalks ordinance. Part of what we did in this is also to acknowledge the complete streets policy that the town has as well. So there are some updates related to that in terms of definitions with bike lanes, shared use path. We've also looked at some of the obstructions to sidewalks with vegetation, and so we have put in additional provisions about clearing limits, both vertically and horizontally from sidewalks as part of this. One of the big provisions that was added is in reference to design, the design standards that we'll be using in town, and rather than creating our own design standards that mimic existing national standards, what we do is just provide reference to those national standards, those national guidelines, and incorporate them into our ordinance. The clerk's office added in a piece about the newspaper vending machines, changing some of the fees related to that. We streamlined the acts harmful to highways regarding discharge of fluids and materials to the roadways. Another big change we made was with the permits for excavation and occupation of right-of-way. The engineering department has two permits that are available for work in our right-of-way. One is for actual excavations in the sidewalk, grass, roadway areas. Typically used by utility companies. It's also used when you have the homes that are developing, redeveloping, and they need new services. The other permit that we give is for occupation of right-of-way, and this typically comes in more in the downtown area where you may have somebody that needs to bring in a dumpster to assist with their work, and the only place to put it is in the roadway, or in the case most recently, we also had some scaffolding that was installed on the public right-of-way to assist with work on the exterior of a building. So what we did is we updated all of the provisions for insurance, for bonds, and for the fees for these permits. It was more of a complicated situation previously where, based on the square footage of your area you were working on, we would calculate it and tell you. We've set more standard fees that by checking our previous permits, our pretty much in line with what the fees have been, but now it's straight dollar values rather than a calculation. The whole idea being that we're hoping to move into using seamless docs for online submission of these permits and not have people come in to apply for them, and then we can do it all electronically. And the big piece for us was putting the performance bonds in place. One municipality had it previously, the other one didn't. And so for us, we've often had to chase developers and sometimes utility companies to come back and repair their trenches, their pavement trenches. And so this gives us the authority to keep their bond and use it to make those repairs if they're non-responsive. So those are really the big changes on this, this ordinance before you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Keller?
I have two. One is in the definition section. It's great that we're defining shared paths and bike lanes and bike paths, but I think the term that most needs definition that was used in the bicycle master plan report is bike boulevard. And I wonder if you could add a definition for that, or is it too hard to define?
We can add that after this is ordinanced. Is that better to do, or can we add it? Is it a substantive change now, Trishka?
I think we can add it now at this meeting. It's just once it's introduced, but we just need to have the language. I don't know if there's language we can pull straight from the bike master plan. If there was a definition in there.
I'm not sure.
If you remember, David?
I don't know.
I mean, it would have to be something that somebody could look up right now, and we would.
I mean,
is that right, Trishka? Like, if we stick it, if we amend it tonight.
It would be better now. I'm trying to think if you were to add it after introduction, I don't know if that would really be such a substantial amendment, if that were the only one as to warrant reintroduction, but it would be better if you could do it now, even before you introduce it.
Could we just do a crude one now, like Bike Boulevard, a big road with blah, 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 and then
Actually,
next time fix
the
it?
language that I would suggest, but I don't know if it's quite good enough, is basically a bike boulevard is a road that is shared by bicycles and automobiles, but which prioritizes the bicycle users over the automobile users.
So can we just put that in and then fine tune it for the next time, since it'll be a small? If we want to, because that sounds good.
Here's from Wikipedia. A bicycle boulevard is a type of bikeway composed of a low-speed street which has been optimized for bicycle traffic.
That works for me too.
Is that?
Well, by the way, the
technical
default
enough?
under the law, if a term is not defined, you go to the dictionary definition. So
Why don't you put that?
But it might not be in the
Why don't you
dictionary.
Paste it so you can send it to her.
All right.
I mean, I have the, do you want, there's also the definition in the bike master plan, but bicycle boulevards are traffic calm streets where bicycles are afforded an enhanced level of safety and comfort.
Oh, that's good. Why don't we use
yeah,
our
we
own
prefer that you
definition?
use something from the bike master plan. So you want to go with
Right.
the definition that's in the bicycle
So
master
it's,
plan.
5.2 what are bicycle boulevards? And then, do you want me to repeat that sentence?
Yes,
You
please.
get it. Bicycle boulevards are traffic calm streets where bicyclists are afforded an enhanced level of safety and comfort.
Great.
That-
And
And
do you
my-
want to be more specific about where that would go, where you're adding
It's
that
just
in the
in the
ordinance?
definition section. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's
the
all
same
I
section where
That's fine.
bike lane was included. The other question I had was, in terms of the excavations in roadways during the moratorium period, in the 5 years after the road is paved, there's a section which requires the developer to repave the entire width, to mill the road. And then there's an exception for smaller excavations where they don't have to do that. And it's really just a comment that, you can ride your bike all over town and see exactly where those smaller trenches were dug and the patches were done, and because the road's falling apart, where those smaller patches were done. And I'm wondering how onerous it would be to say, look, you know, if you're going to open a roadway that's under moratorium, you just have to mill and repave the entire width, no matter how small your hole is, because it's a problem for me.
It also allows some discretion for the engineer to make that decision.
Mhm.
And we would be definitely looking to safeguard the public interest and try to get as much as we can, but we don't want to seem to be, you know, especially if it ever went to a litigation process, to be overreaching in our request.
Can you give me an idea of how small it would have to be to not require the entire width of the road to be redone?
I think if say the utility was within 4 feet of the curb line and it was just work that had to be done in that area, that I think we would look to do more of the infrared patching rather than the full width mill and overlay.
So it's not so much the size of the excavation, but where it's located in the roadway.
Correct.
Are there any other questions yet? Ms. Crumiller and then Mr. Quinn?
Yeah, I had a, I think it might clarify something in section 19(1.3), so I don't know if people are looking at this, but it says, it shall be the municipality's policy to encourage residents to, and then it says, 1, participate in this article, and then it says, 2, compost the leaves. Now I can't find it exactly, but compost leaves. 3, go to the environmental center or something. So it doesn't say or it doesn't say why. So it has 3 options, but it doesn't say, but the 1 is participate in the program, but really the other 2 should say or. And so I thought before the participate in the program in this article, it could say or to minimize the negative environmental and budgetary impacts of the leaf, branch, and log program to, and then say the other things.
Or you can just say or twice. You see how it's written?
Okay, wait, now I have to find it on my...
It's on page 8 of the 37 pages on the streets and sidewalk ordinance, page 8, if you're looking.
Okay, yeah, I'm not, it says, it shall be the municipality's policy to encourage residents to, and then it says, 1, participate in the program described in the article,
And then
2, compost, chip, and mulch. And so the 2 is like...
But it says or after 2. I was thinking about putting or after the 1.
Right, it does, but to me it seems confusing because it says, it's like and. It's like 1, participate in the program, and then 2...
And then later to say put an or.
Or.
Just put an or there.
Put 2 ors.
Yeah, you could take care of it by just saying
Yeah.
or after 1.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking just to put a little plug in, but kind of explain the reasoning, because when you're reading it, it says participate in this program, and then it doesn't say what the program is. Then I think we should say described below or something. Well, maybe not. It just seems confusing to me the way it's written because it doesn't.
And I think there's another reason to encourage people, which is if you can't do it in the time frame, it's not just good for the environment, but also if you can't get your brush out 7 days before the pickup, here are your options. These are the other things you could do.
Yeah, so we could even
Right.
add or to provide more convenient, or to provide more flexibility in the, or we could say something about that too. I mean, otherwise I feel like, for one thing, when people are reading this, we want them to kind of know that it's an expensive program and it's not really good for the environment. So we could say, or to minimize the negative environmental impacts of the leaf, branch, and log program, and to provide something, pardon?
Cost, you want to put that in there too, or?
What the only problem is, how do we know it's going to always be
Well,
the reduction, or, I mean, how do we know this is going to be in place?
well, something about the flexibility so you could do it at any time, and it's not as onerous to, have to stick to the schedule.
Can
like
you just
David
go
said.
back and just reiterate what you're proposing?
Okay, I'm saying, it says, it shall be the municipality's policy to encourage residents to, and then it says, 1, participate in the program described in this article, semicolon. And then it says 2, compost, chip, and/or mulch leaves, branches, and logs on their own property, or 3, take leaves, branches, and logs to the Lawrence Township Ecological Facility. And so my first order of business was just to make it I thought it was confusing to read it because it looks like,
No, I'm just asking for the exact language you're proposing.
oh, okay. To say, it shall be the municipality's policy to encourage residents to, 1, participate in the program described in this article, or,
So you're adding or.
and then to minimize the negative environmental and budgetary impacts of the leaf, branch, and log program, 2, compost, chip, and/or mulch leaves, branches, and logs on their own property, or take leaves, branches, and logs to the Lawrence Township Ecological Facility.
Okay, so you're proposing 2 changes. The first is to add or at the end of line 1.
No, to add it to number 2, I think. So,
I
2,
think, I think the custom is to add it
Oh,
at the
okay.
end of 1.
Okay, yes.
And then to
Yes.
add your phrase
Yes.
to the beginning of 2.
Yes.
Which was in order
to minimize the negative environmental and budgetary impacts
Okay.
of the leaf, branch, and log program.
Okay.
And I would like to add a little clause even before that saying, or when unable to comply with the requirements of the article, or to reduce environmental impact and so on, including the rest of what Jenny was saying.
So you're saying also to add that
That's
before
what I,
2?
right, before 2, because number 2 and 3 are ways to avoid breaking the law, basically, if you can't comply with the requirements
Yeah, so before my phrase, you could say, when
unable to comply
unable to
with the requirements of
of the program.
of the program, yeah.
My only concern is that makes it sound like you're only allowed to compost, chip, or mulch on your own property if you're unable to comply with the requirements of the program. So you're taking it from something.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Now,
Well,
you're-
no,
Yeah, it
because
does sound
it's,
like that.
that-
if you include Jenny's language as well as mine, so if you say, or when unable to comply with the requirements of the program, or for reasons of protecting the environment and reducing costs to the municipality, then do items 2 and 3. So there are 2 conditions under which you might choose to do items 2 and 3.
Okay, I'll just point out again, the addition of your language, and I'm not saying
I
don't put it
agree
in,
with
but it
Trish, that does make it
prioritizes,
sound-
then
I can't-
prioritizes number 1. It says number 1 is the default, but if you can't do number 1, then it's okay to do numbers 2 or 3.
I just think we
and
should
I don't
look,
think that's what
try
you're
to figure out a
intending
way to say it, that it doesn't say it that way. But I think,
But I,
We're-
yeah. I mean, I
and
think
to offer an alternative for those unable to comply.
here. Yeah, that
Well,
would
I
be
just
fine.
think we want to be careful that everyone understands it, because it's becoming.
No,
It's
you'll
becoming-
see it. It won't be,
Yeah,
won't be,
it seems-
it'll be
it seems
less.
ki- It seems kind of confusing.
Okay, but my recommendation before we vote to do the amendment is, I'm just going to see if there's any other discussion items about this, and I'm going to let Jenny type up her recommended language. I think we got the or, but for the
Yeah.
part that goes before 2, so that you can read it clearly into the record
Okay.
for a, so we know what we're voting on, and then you can try to incorporate as much of David's as you feel comfortable at this point. And are there any other items anybody wanted to bring up?
Yeah, this is really quick because, and
Oh,
I
you
did.
had another one, all right.
Yeah, it was just, there's something about a coal hole that's, and nobody thinks there are any more coal holes, so we should just take it out. In 19.3.5.
And what are they?
No, it's the holes in the sidewalk. It's when you have a chute that goes into the basement.
No, we do have those.
Right, with the lifts and stuff, yeah. And this is a-
But that's a doorway, but are there still coal holes to put the coal down?
Oh, the active coal?
Okay, I don't care. When
I
I
don't
read
know.
it, I was like, what's a coal hole?
Oh,
And so I thought we should take it out. But if nobody else thinks, if everybody else knows what a coal hole is,
Yeah,
then we should leave it in.
the provision also includes cellar entrance, so from what Jenny's saying, if you remove coal hole, it at least still remains a cellar entrance or other opening in any sidewalk.
I would be okay with eliminating coal hole.
That's part of our effort to address the Paris Climate Change Agreement recommendations. All right. Mr. Quinn, were you interested in saying something?
I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to point out that I like the way that we deal with standardize our language around snow removal. Nobody thinks about that in April, but we're now setting 24 hours town-wide, and I think that we want to, in light of what Mr. Sharma reminded us, we should set a reminder to do a better job of explaining whose responsibility snow removal is next winter, and that we have new standards. So that was it.
Well, I can say from the public safety aspect, there were, I won't say fines, but notices given to quite a few folks during the storms to remind them to please remove. So that has been something that the police department has been working on.
That's good. I'm glad.
I actually really like that section as well, and the widening of the cleared area, because the borough used to say only 2 feet. The one problem with saying 4 feet is there are sidewalks, I guess, that are still only 3 feet wide in the borough.
Not very many.
I mean, would it make sense to say
Full
4 feet, full width of the sidewalk, or 4 feet, whichever is less, yeah, or greater, sorry. No, less.
Less.
Yeah.
But then people with 5 feet sidewalks have to.
I just, we're drafting on the fly when we haven't thought.
I agree. I think we're going to entertain Ms. Krummeller's phrase at the beginning of line 2. If she's done drafting it, all right.
I am.
And then just remind me the process. Do we need to vote on that, or when somebody does the introduction, they introduce it with that change? Okay, so Jenny, do you want to introduce the ordinance with that? I just want to make sure there's no other firmer. And then before you do that, I just want to see if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak to this ordinance at this point. Okay.
Okay, so do you want me to tell you what I came up with? I'm so proud of getting rid of the coal hole. Okay, it says, or to minimize the negative environmental and budgetary impacts of the leaf, branch, and log program, and to provide flexibility apart from the schedule to, and then compost, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and Ms. Krummeller has this written down in an email, so she can send it
I have
to...
it. Yeah.
She can, I would send it to Dolores and also to Trishka, so they have it.
Actually, send it to Lisa, please.
Oh, Lisa. And then I just wanted to clarify, you were actually making 3 recommended changes. The first was to add an or at the end of line 1. The second was what you just read for 2. And then the third was to remove the coal hole reference.
Right, and with that, I'd like to make a motion to introduce this.
And my addition was the definition for bike
Oh,
boulevard.
right, and also the definition of bike boulevard. Thank you. Okay, so that's what you're introducing with those 4 changes? Okay, and
I'll
then
second it.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
The ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on May 21st, 2018. Next, we come to our resolutions. The first is 18157, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Coded Systems LLC for codification services for 2018 in an amount not to exceed $21,500. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Howard.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18158, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Looney Ricks Kiss Incorporated for professional planning services in an amount not to exceed $50,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes unanimously. And next we come to our goals and priorities for 2018. And I should just note, this is a slightly later date than we had intended, but we've been checking items off the list.
And we've talked about it a bunch of times.
We've talked about it, yeah.
Before we get started, just want to kind of give a quick overview, just so that what we'll be reviewing this evening are the council's 2018 council priorities. In addition to the council priorities, we also have the goals list for our boards and commissions. We won't be reviewing those this evening. There's roughly 70 different items on that list, and in addition to that, there's the staff goals and priorities of about 35 items. Let's get started. And what we'll do is just walk through each one of the items on the list. First, we have completing the neighborhood character study. As council is aware, we've completed the initial recommendations. We had a public meeting reviewing those recommendations with council. They were now in the process of preparing the ordinances, and we hope to have those ordinances to council May, June of this year. The next item we have is the affordable housing plan. We actually went over this schedule a little bit earlier. We've received the court ruling. We finalized the options this evening. The next, and I'll just hit the highlights, the next big date will be providing the court on June 22nd with our fair share housing plan. Next item, again, we took an action on this evening, is the land use harmonization. Phase one of that is the administrative sections of the ordinance, which council just reviewed just a couple of minutes ago. The next, which would be phase two of the ordinance, will be the zoning sections. We have engaged a consultant who will be providing us those services with the retirement of our municipal planner. He will be beginning to put together the actual zoning consolidation in terms of the zoning portion of that. We expect that to begin in April through June, and then to have some introductions in August. Next item that we have is to evaluate the changes to business uses in the central business district. That will begin, we've already started that discussion with the economic development subcommittee. Staff has met with some members of the business community, initial meeting to discuss what their needs are in terms of business uses throughout the central business district. We will evaluate those in May and have draft ordinances for June, final adoption in July.
Hey, Mark, sorry to interrupt. I think, given that it's the sort of third time we've gone through this list, I think we can probably go through it a little faster and then just see if there's anything that people are concerned about or that feel like got dropped.
Yeah.
I do have one item, but I think, why don't you go through what you have, and then I've been getting a series of emails.
It works for me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so let's start on page 3. Really, The one thing I'll indicate here is I did combine a number of items on this page in terms of recommendations for the economic development report. So I combined a number of those. The sign ordinance is combined in here, reviewing the retail uses, and putting the kiosks, the maps in the kiosks. So those are all been combined.
I think you just want
different
to
from before.
forward through the slides too, so people can see them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions on page 3? All right, we'll move to page 4. Page 4, the parking meters replacement, and again, we've given you an update. In May, we really will have more additional updates in May. No other major kind of changes here. Here, I did combine all of the parking ordinances into this section that talks about preparation of amendments and various parking regulations. So if you walk through this, you'll see all of the different parking regulations there. And that goes on to page 5 also. It's continued. Any questions there? We have the health and all policy also on that page, so I'll move on to page 6.
You just have to remember to, so people who are watching can follow along.
On page 6, and again, just want to highlight things that were completed. The website, we've done the website redesign. We've completed training of staff, and we're now in this stage of just continuous refinement of and improvements to the site. Any questions on? Oh, I just highlighted the Bloomberg Challenge champion application, which is an exciting process. So just want to highlight that. Page 7. One thing that's different here, and that's to explore. The second one on this page is explore an expanded broadband services into underserved areas throughout Princeton. One is to take a look at that, investigate some options, and see if there is some opportunities to expand our broadband. That is new. Other than that, any questions? All right. Page 8. No real any changes here. Any questions on this page? Moving to page 9. Just to explain, one of the things that we were working on with the Personnel Committee where it says explore creative incentive programs, that's to provide employees with incentive programs to come up with innovative and creative ideas for the municipalities and to provide some incentives for the employees. Any questions on that page? And again, this page I did combine a number of the Herringtown Wood projects into one item. Moving on to page 10. One item that is new here is to ensure that the municipality meets the NJML, which is the Municipal Excess Liability organization for the state of New Jersey. It's part of our JIF, and that's cybersecurity. There are a number of requirements and standards they have put together, and we'd like to ensure that we meet all those standards and exceed those over the next year, and that'll be through the IT steering committee. Any other questions on that page?
I mean, I'm glad that we have as a top priority the police department hiring.
Yes. And then just one item that was, if you go to the bottom of the page in terms of other issues, that'll go to that page, would be one that's new is the reviewing of the fire watch ordinance. And I know that that's probably something council would like to have some discussion on, so I'll leave an opportunity to have that discussion.
Okay, and I was going to add 2 more things that I think we should discuss. One is the paperless submissions, if we want to add that to this list. And then the third was I have been receiving, I don't know if other people have heard complaints about Airbnbs coming into some neighborhoods, and we do have some people who are making a business out of it, so they're buying homes with the express purpose of using it as an Airbnb. And right now, essentially, if they can provide parking, it's legal. The question is, do we want to, explore? I mean, it is, I think all communities are struggling, a lot of communities are struggling with this right now. So I don't know if the answers are totally clear, but, and if we have the bandwidth to do it, or, if there's a good solution out there. But I think we may be, I just want to let people know, if you're not hearing already, you may be hearing more about it, and is this an opportunity to get out ahead of it? I'm just not sure what that would look like. And whether the planning, I feel like the people who are working on planning issues are pretty tapped out between the affordable housing and the neighborhood character. So, this could be something, I don't know, we put together a different group, maybe some people from the zoning board would want to work on it, or I don't know. So anyway, that's another.
Well, I just wanted to ask you
here.
this question, because didn't you talk to some other mayors or someone and we found out that there is no way that we can tax, that Airbnb wants us to tax, and that sounds really great, but in the end, it's not, the revenue doesn't cover the costs of inspections, et cetera. Is that your understanding?
At the time we looked into it, that was the concern, but
Yeah.
that was maybe 3 years ago
So maybe
or
it's
4
different
years
now?
ago. Well, I think that if you go online, there are many more places being advertised in Princeton.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I think, reunion weekend was always a big time, but other than that, I think you had sporadic use. So, but I think my understanding from talking to staff is that once we decide to regulate, then we also have to
We have to hire people.
we have to make sure that they're up to code.
Right.
So, at this point, maybe what you're suggesting is at least that we start exploring.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess the question is, do we
That
want to try
seems-
to explore it this year? Do we want to put it off till next year? Do we want to put it as another issue where, as time permits and interest is there, we can look into it? Or do we think it's a priority?
Well, how many phone calls have you received?
I've received 3 or 4 from one set of neighbors, and from my understanding of what I'm reading, it's more of I think they're disturbed by the fact that this house that used to be a regular house on their street, now nobody lives there, and it's just this rotating group of people. Although there's no specific, there haven't been any noise problems or any other sort of disturbance. It's more of the idea of it is unsettling.
So I would put it as
I think that is something to be concerned about, but
maybe other issues, and we can, as we go along, if we hear more, or you want to put it as a.
Yes, my question would be, is there anybody on council who is excited to dig into this? Because if not, my suggestion would be we put it on as other issues, so it's a placeholder for next year. I think it's going to only get to be a bigger issue, and we have to decide. I think we're going to need to have some public meetings about it too, because I think it's, there's some advantages to having those opportunities in town.
right, I've
So-
also heard from people that it's a good way for them to stay in their houses, and it provides them extra income and provides a low-cost place for people to stay, so.
Right, I think that's
there's
different.
pluses and minuses.
Well, and I think that's different than you have somebody who's bought up 5 or 6
I
homes
know.
and is continuing to buy up homes because they
I
find
mean,
it to be profitable.
could we at least, if there was an option to just prevent people from buying a home specifically, or,
Well, a lot of times you wouldn't know. I don't think they would tell you I'm buying a home. for-
could we make
Yeah,
some requirement that
I'm
the
buying
person has to
Airbnb.
live there a certain percentage of the time? I wonder if it could be as simple as that. I'd be willing to say, meet with like one other council member and like Trishka or something to talk about this and see if we can think of some. See if we
Why
can come
me?
up with something like that that might improve the situation, to prevent more people from buying, because if you buy a house specifically, it's like running a hotel. It's like you're making a big profit and you're not living here. So I think that's worth addressing.
Well, my recommendation might be, if others agree, that we put it on other issues for now, that I hear Ms. Kremler is volunteering to do some research.
Sure.
Maybe let's
Yay,
just
Ginny.
see. I would maybe reach out to the league, and then
Yeah.
this is something that's like, people are dealing with it all across the country. So
Yeah.
maybe just sort of see what other towns are doing.
Okay.
I would focus on other college towns too that are not cities, and they might have more of our attitude towards how to approach it. Thank you.
And meanwhile, no one on council buy a home and turn it into an Airbnb.
I was just going to say, Jerry Muller, you know, somebody with a real expertise in the land use law is going to need to be involved, because even if other towns around the country are solving, you know, New Jersey has different laws than other states do, and we may not be able to do what
Right, that's true.
can be done.
Okay, and then the other idea that came up tonight was about the paperless submissions. How do folks, if people want to put that down as another issue, do people want to elevate that to priority?
I would like to elevate it. You know, earlier when we were talking about it, Mark suggested it could go into the effort to update the zoning as a way to address it fairly quickly, and that's part of this year. So I would like to see that added to.
Is that the harmonization, you mean?
Well, I mean, not the harmonization, although I think the harmonization of the zoning ordinance is also on the docket for this year.
Correct.
But there's also, changes actually to the zoning that are on the.
Right, there's part two
On
of
the
the zoning
council.
ordinance changes.
Okay.
And again, what I was speaking to is just, and I think your concern was how to make it where it would be an option to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, but maybe we can have that discussion. I'm not sure if we could write something that would.
I thought we
fit
just, it is an option right now.
It is
Right.
not,
Oh, to not do the paper, you
Right.
mean?
right.
I feel like my understanding, and I don't know, I don't want to put Deanna on the spot, was that there were some state requirements where things
There are,
had to
and
be.
the language that I had suggested was that electronic submission, to the extent permitted by state regulation, would be an option. Not that, that's a clean, simple way to get it into the ordinance without having to.
And I think there's some discussion there. I'm not sure what the answer is, quite frankly.
Right.
We'd have to discuss it, but maybe that's a way of just dealing with, we get a group of people to sit and have a conversation about how do we
It just,
Yeah, my
kind of do it in a way that makes sense.
my recommendation as a first step for this would be for whoever the planning board representatives, HPC representatives, PEC representatives, all the people on council who are on commissions that deal with the applications, go take this to their boards and commissions and just get some sense. Because I know, depending on who's on there, a lot of people like to be able to open up the plans and look at
Right.
them.
I just, I want to point out, I don't remember if it's come up before council before. We've talked about this at the planning board. West Windsor's already doing this. Hopewell's already doing this. We're supposed to be a progressive town.
Right.
This hits on 3 out of 4 of our council priorities for the year. And I think that, to take it to the boards and let people have a veto, because they're going to be people on every board who like the idea. I like the idea. It's easier for me to look at things on my notebook than having these great big sets of drawings. And so, you're going to be pitting people against, you're going to be pitting the old guard against the new guard. I'm not sure why the old guard should get veto power over making this decision.
Well, I'll say why, and I know you won't be surprised, and that's that I feel it's hypocritical for anyone who gets a newspaper delivered in a plastic bag every day, sometimes 2 newspapers, to be worrying about the environment in this, of one recycling can worth every meeting, when you have a newspaper delivered instead of a digital subscription, you're spending the
All
the
right.
environmental impact
Jenny,
of that is
cancel-
horrible.
I'll cancel
But
my
I
newspaper
just
want to stop
find-
it. I just want to,
subscription.
I feel
No,
like.
I find this annoying, that it just, to do something like this that is so small compared to such a, it's not a big environmental issue, when the delivered newspapers are huge.
I think, I just don't want to be debating the actual issue right now. I think we
Okay.
want to be doing more the process
Okay.
of whether, number one, whether we want to make it a priority this year, and then if so, who should be responsible for it and what actually we're trying to get
I mean,
done.
it doesn't sound like
If I-
there's a resounding push for this to be a priority this year, sorry.
So it was identified by PEC among its goals. It should have been
Okay.
captured in the BCC goals. And it's been a topic of discussion for the entire 5 years that I've been on the planning board. So, I mean, I think that the will is there, as long as people who have the option of having paper, if they're not comfortable viewing plans on a screen, then I don't sense that there would be much opposition to it.
Yeah, Mark?
And I just want to correct myself a little bit, because I didn't realize that this was a checklist item, which means it's mandatory. So I was thinking we could do an option. The way to really handle this would be is once we have something, a system in place to kind of handle it, you would just simply just amend the checklist at that point. I think the original concept of having the option or giving someone the authority to make the change, because it is a checklist, and talking to Trishka, that would be required. So I think there is some more discussion we need to have about this before we kind of move it forward.
So in terms of the priorities, what are you recommending then?
So I'm recommending that this is something, as we did the other ones, would be to put it on the other issues so
Okay.
that we can develop a fully before we actually begin to do it.
Okay, and then we'll understand better what the action steps will be?
Correct.
Okay. Is that okay?
As long as I can keep working on it.
Yes, we'll put your name next to it. Can you put David in parentheses after the? Excellent, thank you. All right, and were there any other items that anybody wanted to put on, or that anybody wanted to take off and deprioritize? Yeah, Mr. Cohen?
This is too specific, but I'm going to mention it because I'm not on the group that's looking at the zoning changes in the central business district, and I want to make sure that it gets considered, and that's the ability to have political headquarters be on the ground floor in the central business district. It's an issue that's come up repeatedly in recent years. I think that it can really add to the vibrancy of the street, and I want to make sure that's in the mix.
I'm on that group, as is Mr. Liverman and Ms. Fraga, so.
Yeah,
we'll
it's a
take
good
that
idea.
back. Yep. Right. Any other comments on the goals? All right. Is there a motion to approve, motion for 18-159, resolution approving Council 2018 goals and priorities with the changes that we talked about? So it was adding paperless submissions and Airbnb research under the other items.
So moved?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Howard and seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, resolution passes unanimously. And I would just remind everyone on council to take a look at the list in terms of your board and commission, and take that back, just so that we're completing the loop of that discussion for this year. And excellent, all right, and then hopefully in a couple months, we'll get a progress report on how we do when we get to midpoint. Okay, now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by a single vote. Are there any items that anybody would like removed from the consent agenda, Ms. Carmella?
Yeah, I thought it might be a good idea to take off the,
Number 5?
yeah, and just
Okay.
have a report from the,
Okay, anything else?
No,
Okay.
Mayor, I would move we adopt 1 through 4 and 6.
Okay, all right,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Those moved by Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman, and passed unanimously. And then we come to the final item, 18164, resolution to support restoring voting rights to felons.
Yeah, and I'd like to introduce that resolution, and I support it. But we were asked at the press conference today about it, and I thought it would be a good idea to take it off the consent agenda because some people might consider it controversial, but I know it was referred to by the Civil Rights Commission.
I'll second the motion and report that CRC voted to refer this to council with enthusiasm. So.
And I think the resolution
Unanimously.
speaks for itself, the language in it, and also the letter that's accompanying it. So I want to agree with that.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.